The Raiders agreed to a deal to acquire a player in the position that's most important to a football team. Now they turn their attention to legal tampering. That plus more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for March 10th, 2025.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. We definitely appreciate you. If you're catching the show wherever you find your favorite podcast, or you're checking us out by way of the YouTube page, you know we appreciate both. The show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your support, Raider Nation, and obviously the job my man Ari does behind the scenes on the YouTube page, making sure we're looking good and sounding good each and every day. We shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line wide open like some old school TV antennas, 707-654-4693. Matter of fact, that's how we'll close out the show today. Segment number 3, we'll hear from you. Calls, texts, plenty of feedback, especially off the news that we found out about on Friday. The Raiders acquiring Geno Smith by way of trade. Of course, that cannot become official until Wednesday when the new league year opens up. But that's the big news. A lot of reaction for that in segment number 3. Segment number 2, legal tampering. I think it's the silliest term ever, but this is what they do in the NFL. This is how they keep us hooked, right? Legal tampering period opens up today. It opens up this morning. As a matter of fact, based off what time you're listening to this, it might be open right now. But we'll talk all things legal tampering. We'll talk about free agency. We'll talk about who the Raiders should be focusing on, their own guys, and some guys outside of the building. That's all coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes of the day. And we got to go all the way back to Friday, and we'll do that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show. That's FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So let's go ahead and turn back the clock. Let's go back down to Friday. We're starting to get some rumblings that there's a possibility that the Raiders and the Seahawks could be in conversations for Geno Smith. And then late on Friday, my radio show, matter of fact, Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920, I think it was about to go into the third hour of the show when it became official like a referee's whistle. And again, nothing is actually official until the new league year opens up on Wednesday, but it's about as close to being official as possible. Adam Schefter tweeted out, Geno Smith is being traded to the Raiders for a third-round pick per sources. That pick ends up being number 92, the one that they received from the Jets for Davante Adams. So basically, Davante Adams goes to the Jets, Geno Smith comes to the Raiders from the Seahawks. So that's basically what it is. Davante for Geno, which it's funny. I didn't know that the pick that the Jets gave to the Raiders was pick 92. I thought it was like in the 70s or something, but okay. No harm, no foul. Whatever the case may be, Davante's out, Geno's in. Geno, for the record, and I know some people that hear Geno Smith, they're like, I don't know about that. He threw for 4,320 yards in 2024, 21 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Obviously, that's not a good ratio. He's got to do a lot better when it comes to the touchdowns as opposed to the interceptions. But 70.4 completion percentage. He actually ranked 4th in the league last season behind only Burrow, Goff, and Mayfield. Now, that's the positive. The negative, he took 50 sacks last season, which is second behind Caleb Williams, 68. And I know Seattle did not have a very good offensive line, but taking 50 sacks is not a good thing. So he's obviously going to have to do a lot better than that. But he does have mobility. He's one of these guys that I've been talking about. He's not fleet-footed. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Jalen Hurts. He's not going to just run around the yard like a Kyler Murray. But he could pick up 3rd and 8 when it's there. He could pick up 3rd and 10. If he sees some green grass, he can go pick it up, right? He could be a threat in Chip Kelly's offense as well, right? I mean, you can go all the way back to West Virginia. Man, I'll tell you, it's so funny how things come full circle. When Geno Smith was at West Virginia lighting it up, man, he had such a prolific offense there. So you know what he was capable of doing. It just never came to fruition for him in the National Football League. But his most success that he had was where? In Seattle with the Jets and Pete Carroll. So I think that when you look at all the guys that were out there by way of free agency or even trade, I think this was probably the best case scenario. Sam Darnold was going to cost a ton of money. Didn't like that. Aaron Rodgers, I wasn't a big fan of that just because, well, it's Aaron Rodgers and you just don't know what you're going to get at this stage of the game. And I don't see him as a guy who's going to mentor the next guy. Justin Fields, I'm not convinced that he could play the quarterback position, but for 1 year I was okay with that. Russell Wilson is Russell Wilson. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of great options out there. I think this is the best case scenario for the Raiders, landing a guy for a 3rd-round pick. He's got 1 year left on his deal. The conversation out there is that they're going to extend him, right? That was part of the hang-up in Seattle. They were trying to work on a contract extension. They couldn't come to an agreement. I always like when teams trade for guys and then immediately extend them if that's what it is, just so you get that out of the way. The Raiders have not done that, so we'll see what that looks like. That could change how we all feel about this trade once it's all said and done when it comes to the extension. I don't believe it takes them out of the conversation to draft a quarterback at 6, but what it does, it allows them not to have to trade up. That was one of the things that I was really adamant about after the Matt Stafford situation did not come to fruition. I thought, okay, just do what you got to do. Go get your quarterback. Now I think with Geno Smith being a quarterback that you feel like, hey, if this guy has to start for a year, maybe even 2, you feel okay that he can get it done. Again, the guy threw for over 4,000 yards in 2024. Obviously, he's capable. So they can allow a guy like Shedeur Sanders to drop to him at number 6, and they can select him if they want to, if, in fact, he does drop. We'll see about that. I'm very skeptical that that's going to happen. Or they could say, you know what, we don't need this guy right now. We can go for an Ashton Genty. I think that's a little high to get Genty, but okay, that could be a direction they're going. They can go and get the big defensive tackle Graham if he's available, right? They can go get the best offensive lineman if he's available. Like it gives them options and flexibility at the number 6 spot as far as I'm concerned, by bringing in one Geno Smith. So, again, the extension is going to be something to pay attention to. I think they're going to extend them from probably 2 to 3 years, and obviously there's outs in those contracts. They're not like it's just fully guaranteed. We'll see what it looks like, but his reports are that he's looking for around $40 to $45 million a year. Kind of the going rate for the quarterback, something that Sam Darnold was looking for. I was not a big fan of that, but at least Geno's had way more success in the league than Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold did it for 1 year. Geno Smith did it pretty much the whole time that he was in Seattle. He's been a very capable quarterback. I mean, hell, he's the reason why Pete Carroll and company are the reason why he got a contract extension in Seattle. So not too bad. Max Crosby, obviously the leader of the team, he was he was all in on the move for Geno Smith. He tweeted out, real simple, LFG. Let's blank and go, if you know what I'm talking about, something that Tom Brady used to say all the time before every single game. So obviously Max Crosby felt pretty good about the Raiders agreeing to deal to get Geno Smith from the Seattle Seahawks for a 3rd-round pick. Steve Weiss from the NFL Network was on the Insider Show on Friday and gave his instant reaction to the move for Geno Smith by the Raiders.
Tom, you guys are hitting the real high notes right here. Look, I saw Raiders owner Mark Davis at the Super Bowl, and he told me we have got to get a quarterback. And real quick, to go to that Max Crosby tweet, LFG, the guy helping them help him find a quarterback, Tom Brady, that was a big thing for him too. And Mark Davis said they were going to lean on Tom. So now, as Ian said, they've got a veteran quarterback in here with the experience that can help them level up and change the culture, much like the Chargers did last year. Look at how tough that division is. They had to get a quarterback with some skins on the wall who's still got some time left in his career to get things turned around. Now Chip Kelly, the new offensive coordinator, can start designing an offense that plays to Geno's strengths. And just historically, what do the Raiders like to do? They like to throw the deep ball. We know Geno can throw the deep ball, so he checks some of the boxes organizationally, but more so culturally as Pete Carroll tries to turn it around. And then we'll get to the Seahawks end of things a little bit later.
Steve Weiss, NFL Network, got a lot of respect for him, been around the game for a very long time. He shares his thoughts right there on Geno Smith. And look, the dude's got a very strong arm as well. So you want to talk about stretching the field. He has an opportunity to stretch the field, something Steve Weiss mentioned right there. Just got a couple more nuggets for you here in segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, news and notes of the day. We also found out on Friday that the Raiders plan to release Andre James. Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network tweeted out the Raiders plan to release starting center Andre James after the new league year begins. One of the last players remaining from the Oakland days. James played in 89 games with 60 starts over 6 seasons. So I think that we all knew the writing was on the wall eventually for Andre James, especially after the acquisition of JPJ, Jackson Powers-Johnson. We all believe that center is the best position for JPJ, and we'll see that moving forward. He'll be the starting center. It's interesting to see what they'll do with Dylan Parham. Will they keep him on the roster? Is he a guard? I mean, he's a guy that can compete for center as well. He's played that, but I think that JPJ is the Raiders' best option there at the center position. And my final nugget here for segment number 1, just a tip of the cap to John Spytek and Pete Carroll. Myles Garrett, big-time edge rusher for the Cleveland Browns, had demanded a trade. He was very dug in that he wanted to be traded. Well, he got paid on Sunday, and he got paid a whole lot. We talked about it after Max Crosby got extended, and I said it was smart. It was serious business by the Raiders to go and get it done first, so they didn't have to try to one-up whoever gets paid. Myles Garrett got paid in a major way on Sunday by the Cleveland Browns. They agreed to a contract extension that averages $40 million per year and $123.5 million in guaranteed money, and he is now the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. Don't forget, you still have Micah Parsons coming down the pipeline, so he's probably going to try to get around $45 million a year. I mean, this is quarterback money these guys are getting paid. So they got Max Crosby taken care of. He was the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. We all talked about it here on the show. It's going to be 1 or 2 days max that was going to happen. And really it was, right? I mean, he made it all the way till Sunday, and then Myles Garrett eclipsed him. TJ Watt's going to get paid. We know Trey Hendrickson probably won't get paid as much as Max Crosby, but he's still going to get paid. Smart business by the Raiders to get it done early, right? Get it done first, and so they don't have to play catch up. Look, Jamar Chase, I know it's a different position. He's a wide receiver. He's going to get paid and wants to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. So, I mean, all this is like the next man up, next man up, next man up effect. The Raiders don't have to worry about that. Again, just really smart business on their side of things to go ahead and get the deal done. So hats off, tip of the cap to John Spytek and Pete Carroll to make sure that they got Max Crosby under contract. It's funny. We found out on Friday as well that, the Seahawks were trying to trade DK Metcalf and Geno Smith for Max Crosby, and the Raiders like, nope, not going to happen. Oh, no, by the way, we're extending them. And that happened quick, fast, and in a hurry. So, again, I just got to give a lot of credit to John Spytek and Pete Carroll for making sure that was a priority. So this thing didn't have to drag along, and all of a sudden the price of doing business continues to go up. I always say it, man, yesterday's price is not today's price. Coming up in segment number 2, legal tampering begins today. What in the world does that even mean? Well, I'll explain it. We'll break it down. We'll talk all things free agency coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about one of the great sponsors here on the show, and that is Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates, only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Time to get into one of the funniest times, or not funniest times, but just one of the funniest definitions that are on the NFL calendar. That's the legal tampering period that begins. I always laugh at that, the legal tampering period. Like it's legal to tamper. Why don't you just open up free agency a couple days earlier? But again, this is what the NFL does. They're really good at it. And for some that don't know, what does that even mean, Q? Legal tampering period. Well, I'm glad you asked. On Monday, March 10th, which is today, noon Eastern, teams are permitted to contact and begin negotiating contracts with the agents of players who are unrestricted free agents. This is the legal tampering period. It ends at 4 p.m. Eastern on March 12th, which is when free agency signing period officially begins. So what that means is right now, teams can reach out. John Spytek, Pete Carroll and company can reach out to agents of free agents and work on a contract. Just like, you saw Tom Telesco do a year ago with Christian Wilkins. They can come up with a deal. You're going to see some go really quickly. Like as soon as 9 a.m. hits Pacific time, boom, you're going to see some deals already done, which is impossible to get done that quickly. But there's been conversations going on behind the scenes. So that's what happened last year with Christian Wilkins, but nothing could become official until Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific time. So that's what the legal tampering period is. It's pretty funny to me, but it just is what it is. So we roll with it. And so now the Raiders have to turn their attention to players inside the building and also outside of the building. And just for bookkeeping purposes, after taking care of Max Crosby, who has a $38.1 million cap hit in 2025, and trading for Geno Smith, who has a $31 million cap hit right now, when they get an extension done with them, that will lower. Their effective cap space is about $44.5 million heading into free agency, which is the 14th most in the NFL. And off top, I want to talk about the Raiders focusing on their own guys, their own free agents. And I should have said this in segment number 1, but it all kind of tied together. here in segment number 2 that the Raiders have decided to keep one of their guys in Adam Butler. He was a big-time player for the Raiders in 2024, defensive tackle that really filled a big void once Christian Wilkins went down. Ian Rappaport tweeted out on Sunday, kind of late on Sunday, the Raiders are keeping one of their own as they have agreed to terms with standout defensive tackle Adam Butler after a career year. He gets a 3-year deal worth $16.5 million with $11 million in guarantees to stay in Las Vegas. So that's one of the guys on Patrick Graham's defense that is going to stick with the silver and black. And it's funny, maybe Patrick Graham was out celebrating on Sunday after he found out about Adam Butler. Obviously, there's other guys on the defensive side of the ball that are going to need to be focused in on. But I saw him at the Golden Knights game. So Patrick Graham and his family were at the Golden Knights game on Sunday night, having a good time and celebrating, even though Vegas did not win the game, but just having a good time, sitting in the front row. He took home a puck. It was kind of cool. But big ups to Adam Butler. He told us back in training camp in Costa Mesa, California, that he wanted to get a big-time deal. He knew what it was going to take. He wanted to be on the field a lot. And he said, I want to get more money. I want to get more money by having a big year. And he did have a big year. And so now he's rewarded with the 3-year deal, $16.5 million, $11 million in guarantees. With that being said, the Raiders do need to focus in on their guys. And I think that's what their biggest priority is going to be, is their own free agents, like the Robert Spillanes, the Trayvon Merricks, Nate Hobbs, Malcolm Kuntz, K'Lavon Chason, the other defensive tackle, Jonathan Jenkins. I think that Jenkins might be a guy that they'll probably wait a little while on, just because I don't think that he's going anywhere just quite yet. I think he's comfortable with the Raiders, and I think they're comfortable with him. So they'll probably explore different directions that they can go, and then if they can't find another guy to fill that void, they might bring Jank back. But there's other guys, like I said, Spillane, Merrick, Hobbs, Kuntz, Chason, all those guys are priorities. And I'm not saying all those guys are going to come back, but I do think that, especially in this free agent class, it's not the sexiest, it's not the deepest. I think the Raiders are going to spend a lot of attention. Now, you saw Zach Bond of the Philadelphia Eagles. He got paid a pretty nice little sum after winning the Super Bowl. He got a 3-year deal worth about $50-something million. So if you're looking at Robert Spillane, you're probably looking at that contract saying, okay, that's where I need to be. So do the Raiders value him at that level? We'll find out. I think him and Trayvon Merrick will probably be the toughest two to keep, but I think those will probably be the top 2 priorities. Malcolm Kuntz, we never got to see him on the field in 2024. I think that maybe the Raiders can land him on a 1-year prove-it deal just to see who he is, 1 year removed from the ACL tear that he suffered in preseason before. So he never got on the field in 2024. So there's a good chance that they could probably keep him on a 1-year prove-it deal. But if there's a team out there that really believes in what they saw in 2023, they might overpay, which is exactly what free agency is. Nate Hobbs, he's another guy that I think will have a lot of interest outside of the building. I think he's very valuable to the Raiders defense, but we also know that the availability is not always there for Nate Hobbs. So that's going to be something that's going to cost him in the long run. How much are the Raiders valuing him, especially with the lack of availability? Other teams, and I've heard that the Pittsburgh Steelers are pretty high on Nate Hobbs, how much do they value him out? It's going to probably come down to a dollar and cents thing, not more like a fit or where he thinks he'll be the most productive, but he's probably trying to get paid as a former 5th-round pick. So those are the guys I look at as the real focus for the Raiders: Spillane, Merrick, Hobbs, Kuntz, Chason. I think that Chason's got a really good chance to come back. Butler, they're already bringing him back. That's a good thing. And then Jonathan Jenkins. Those are the guys in-house that the Raiders need to focus in on. Some guys out of the house, guys from other teams that I'm looking at that I think the Raiders could have some interest in. And again, I don't think that they're going to go crazy. I don't think that they're going to sign just a bunch of dudes, but I think they're going to be very selective and find some guys that they like, that they know could be key cogs on this team. Priorities for me: cornerback, wide receiver, offensive line. And that's what I think the priorities need to be for the Raiders. And they probably are for the Raiders. Cornerback, wide receiver, offensive line. As far as cornerback goes, Byron Murphy of the Vikings, he's a big-time player. He's been a big-time player since he was in college. When he was in Washington, I thought he was a really good player. I was hoping the Raiders were going to draft him. They didn't. Arizona got him. Then when he was a free agent leaving Arizona, I thought, okay, maybe the Raiders can get him now. Then he went to Minnesota, had a really good year. Now he's going to be available as well. I think the Raiders should prioritize him. From what I've read, from what I've seen, he looks like he's going to be a priority. I think he should be a priority. I think he's a guy that Pete Carroll would love to have on his roster just because of the kind of guy he is. The guy, he's competitive. He has production as far as turning the ball over, creating turnovers, getting the ball back for the offense. He'll do some really good things. So Byron Murphy is a guy I definitely believe from the cornerback position the Raiders will have a lot of attention on. DJ Reed, same thing. Cornerback for the Jets. I think those two guys, I would love to see both of those guys. You know how I am. DBs win games. I would love to see both those guys added to the mix, and then you add that in the mix with Jacorian Bennett, who was having a career year until he got injured and ended up on IR. I mean, that you're talking about some really good corners, and then who knows what happens with Nate Hobbs. Can you imagine that? Having Jacorian Bennett, DJ Reed, Byron Murphy, and Nate Hobbs all in your secondary competing, right? And look, I don't know what's going to happen with Jack Jones. I know Jack Jones has ball production. You know, he's really good at going and attacking the ball, but he also gave up a lot of big plays in 2024, right? And so I know that Pete Carroll's going to say, okay, this is good, this is bad. And they're going to try to, kind of compare and contrast and see what is the smarter decision and how they move forward. So that's going to be interesting to see what they do with Jack Jones. But if you had DJ Reed and Byron Murphy and you have Jacorian Bennett, and maybe you're able to bring back Nate Hobbs, man, you're cooking with grease as far as secondary goes. You might really have another version of the Legion of Boom. And again, I'm not saying that they're going to go and get both those guys, but me being selfish, I would have no problem if they went and got both. But I do see at least one of those guys in the mix for the Raiders, either Byron Murphy or DJ Reed. As far as wide receivers go, this is an interesting one. Tyler Lockett, who was released just the other day from Seattle, I think that's a no-brainer. He's not a number one wide receiver, but he's a really good wide receiver. He had a lot of production there in Seattle. I remember when he left Kansas State, he was a guy that was really looked at as a special teams ace, went to Seattle, and all of a sudden had a lot of production at the wide receiver position. He became a really good player at the wide receiver position. So I think that that's a no-brainer. Every road has been, basically paved to Las Vegas since Tyler Lockett got released from the Seahawks. So I think there's, no doubt that he's going to end up in Vegas with the Raiders. So he was released. He'll be in the mix as far as I'm concerned. Chris Godwin, another guy that makes sense for the Raiders. He's a wide receiver from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, has a lot of familiarity with John Spytek, has a lot of familiarity with Tom Brady. He's coming off that dislocated ankle injury, but from everything that I'm seeing, he's going to have a pretty big market when it comes to free agency. So he might end up getting wide receiver one money, even though he's coming off that dislocated ankle. So I have no doubt that he's probably going to be a part of the mix as well. We saw Devontae Adams. He ended up going to the Rams, so he's out of the conversation. Plus, there was, word that there was no way he was coming back. Amari Cooper, he's longer in the tooth. Stephon Diggs is coming off a torn ACL. DK Metcalf, I thought there was still a chance that maybe he could be involved with the Raiders. Maybe they can make a trade for him. We find out on Sunday that the Steelers made a trade for him, gave up a second-round pick, and gave him $150 million. So they got their guy. So DK Metcalf is off the trade block as well. So really, when it comes to wide receivers, I'm looking at Lockett, who I think is kind of like a shoo-in. He's going to be that guy. And then Chris Godwin, I think is a good shot that he ends up in Vegas as well. The Raiders are still looking for one more guy to be that wide receiver. You've already got Jacoby Myers. Brock Bowers, obviously, was fantastic his rookie year. Yes, he's a tight end, but, we know what kind of production he put in, so he's a big-time weapon. Trey Tucker, he just hasn't been consistent as a route runner, so we'll see what ends up happening with him. But he'll be a part of the mix. The Raiders are looking for at least one more wide receiver that can be a guy now for Geno Smith, Aiden O'Connell, and probably another quarterback that they get in the draft. So as far as wide receivers, that's what I'm looking at. Offensive line, they already added Alex Kappa from the Bengals, who had a really bad year, but he's familiar with John Spytek and Tom Brady. They won a Super Bowl there in Tampa Bay, so he's going to be added to the mix. JPJ, I'm sure he's going to be the starting center, especially after Andre James gets released. Dylan Parham, he's going to be part of the mix. Jordan Meredith, he's part of the mix. He had a really good year as a guy that there wasn't big expectations for Meredith when he, when he joined the team and when he ended up getting into the lineup, but he did a really good job. So he's going to be part of the mix. As far as guys outside of the building, you can look at Mekhi Becton from Philly, who's a big dude. That's a big, big man, right? He was a guy that was drafted by the Jets to be a tackle, didn't work out there, ended up in Philadelphia. They kicked him inside the guard, and he did really well, but he's a big dude. So Pete Carroll's son, Coach Carroll, he's the offensive line coach. Joe Philbin, obviously, is the assistant there as well. He's going to help out. I'm not sure what kind of body type they're looking for as far as offensive linemen go. Like, that'll be the interesting part. If they're looking for a big dude like Becton, then I can see him being part of the mix. But he might not be as athletic as they're looking for. Again, I'm not too sure exactly what the prototypical offensive lineman that they're looking for, but he's out there and available as far as a guard goes. Tevin Jenkins from the Bears, he's out there. He's available as far as guard goes. Brandon Scherf from the Jaguars, he's out there available. Man, the Jaguars have just basically dismantled their whole team, right? So those guys are all part of the mix. But that's what I think the Raiders are going to do. I do think that you'll find out something today. You'll hear about a agreement or two that they come up with. And again, none of these agreements can be made official until Wednesday, till the new league year opens up. But cornerbacks, wide receiver, offensive line, and guards in particular is where I think that the Raiders are really going to try to butter their bread in the free agency process, and obviously worry about their own guys as well. But they've got Max Crosby in the mix, which is great, right? I mean, he's not going anywhere for a good amount of time, so you know that's good. Adam Butler now, he's in the mix. You know that's good. Now they have to turn their attention to Trayvon Merrick, which, again, I can't guarantee that he's going to be back. He's going to be one of those safeties that I think is going to be heavily sought after. I know Marcus Epps is out there and available as well. He's coming off a torn ACL. I think once they sign Isaiah Palamau, then that kind of put the writing on the wall for Marcus Epps that he'll be on the way out, and Trayvon Merrick will be the focus point for the Raiders trying to bring him back. Nate Hobbs, we'll see what they do with him. But there's a handful of guys. I would have no problem if they brought back Kuntz and Chase on. I think those would be some really good players to bring back. Would love to see the Raiders, get their guys that they feel like are key contributors. Even Hobbs, even though I know that the availability is questionable, but I think he's still a really good player. I just don't know what he's going to be looking for on the open market. So that's how I think that the Raiders will attack free agency and the legal tampering period, which, again, if you're watching on YouTube, you see me smile. The legal tampering just sounds so silly, but it is what it is. And by the way, they've been legally tampering, and I'm not just talking about the Raiders, I'm talking about every team in the league, has been legal tampering since the scouting combine in Indianapolis. That's one of the biggest things that they do in Indy is they tamper, right? Scouts, coaches, GMs, they all talk to agents as they start to get the ball rolling on what could be a possible deal in place once free agency opens up. So, depending on what time you're listening to this, it might be getting ready to open up, 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern, or maybe it's a little bit later on in the day and it's already full throttle and the Raiders are already making moves. Well, we'll be talking about it coming up on tomorrow's show. But coming up next, we'll turn our attention to you. What's on your mind? Your calls and texts, 707-654-4693. It's the Locked On Raiders podcast voicemail line. We'll hear from you next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. And March Madness, it is here. FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. And right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. And I don't know about you, but I've been watching a lot of the conference tournaments, especially the women's conference tournaments. Thought they were fantastic on Sunday, and that's just part of the action. You could pick favorites, you can pick the spreads, you can pick the totals, you can pick the game props. Whatever way you want to attack March Madness, you can do it with FanDuel. It's always a lot of fun to stay in on the action. It's easy and it's fast. So what do you have to do? Visit FanDuel.com, get in on college hoops action all tournament long. Again, FanDuel.com to get in on March Madness all tournament long. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts. You have that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start off with a call from Raider Kev from Arlington, Texas, calling to give his thoughts on trading for Geno Smith.
What's up, Q? This is Raider Kev out of Arlington, Texas. It's been a minute since I called, but you always one of my first listens in the morning. So keep up the great work, man. I want to give my insight or my thoughts on bringing on Geno Smith. I absolutely love the idea. I think this man is he puts us in a great position in the quarterback room to develop that position. And the reason why I say that is that he's a quarterback that has the ability to put us in the playoffs. He has the ability to make us relevant. We can build around him. And no, he's not a long-term man. He's not going to be here for 10 years, right? But what he does, he gives us the opportunity to sit at number 6. And if Sanders drops to us at 6, we can take him. And now we have a very strong quarterback room. We have competition at that position now. Okay. We're not looking for a plug and play type guy. We're actually building that room. And that's what we have been missing for quite some time. And that's what I see in this situation. If Sanders isn't there, we get, a quality guy at 6, and we can move on, okay? We're not stressed over who we're getting at 6. We can let that board fall to us. Then what we can do, if Sanders isn't there, we can get another guy, either later in the draft, or next year. Okay, we have the ability to get a quality guy that will help build the room, because we actually have a legitimate quarterback now. We don't have a Band-Aid. We have a guy that can put us in the playoffs. We don't have to stress over that position. And that's what we've been lacking here for quite some time, man. People have had problems with Carr. I'm not really going to, really press that situation. But what we did, when Carr was here, what we did have was stability at that position. And that's what I'm looking for us to get back. And this is how I view this opportunity. We have the opportunity to pick a guy that will take that stress out of us for quite some time. I think we can have a good quarterback room for decades with this move.
Kevy Kev, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And I believe you nailed it, man, right? You don't have to force the issue in the draft to trade up. You can allow the board to fall the way that it's going to fall. You can get the best player available, whether that's an Ashton Genty, whether that's an offensive lineman, whether that's a defensive lineman like Mason Graham. Any of these guys that could be possibly available to you. I don't see a situation where Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter falls to 6. But you never know, right? You never know how these things go. One of those guys could be available. There's so many different options. And at the end of the day, Shedeur might drop to 6. And you could say, yep, going to draft him, let him sit for a while, and then go from there, right? Because, again, I believe that was the idea anyway the whole time, was to get a veteran quarterback in, let the rookie quarterback sit behind him. But you could also address the quarterback position later, right? You can go with a guy like a Dylan Gabriel. You can go with a guy like a Jackson Dart. You can go with a guy like a Jalen Milroe. You can go with, there's so many different, Will Howard later on if you feel like that's the case. And you're not married to him like that. Okay, they have to be the franchise quarterback. They could go in there. They can compete. They might be good. If they are, okay, maybe you got something there. And if they're not, then that's okay, right? You have another guy that's in line to be a backup, and then you can decide what you do with him moving forward. So you do have options. I think you hit it right on the head. Raider Kev, thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you leading us off today. How about a text from AB in Inglewood? Inglewood, always up to no good. He said, what's up, Q? AB from Inglewood, just reaching out about some news regarding Vikings free agent cornerback Byron Murphy Jr. According to Deshaun Reed, the Raiders are expected to aggressively pursue Byron Murphy once free agency begins. And man, would that be a great addition to the secondary. He's always been one of my favorite corners. He's just entered his prime, and he has that alpha mentality. He plays with a swagger similar to Jack Jones and can match up against any team's wide receiver 1. Curious to know what you think of Murphy Jr. If you think there's a strong chance he lands in Vegas, free agent contract predictions, signs with LV on a 3-year, $40 million deal. That's AB in Inglewood. And, yeah, as I mentioned in segment number 2, Byron Murphy has been one of those guys that I've been a big fan of since he was at Washington. I thought he was he could have been a Raider coming out of college. Arizona ended up picking up in the second round. Minnesota got him last year. He's done some really good things. I would love to see him, in the Raiders secondary. And you're right, he does have that swagger similar to Jack Jones. I just don't think he gets himself in trouble as far as giving up, touchdowns and big plays as much as Jack Jones. He gambles, but he doesn't quite gamble like Jack. So yeah, I could definitely see him being part of that mix. And I don't really quite know what the free agency money is. 3 years, $40 million makes sense. But, man, you know how it is in free agency. It's always an inflated number, right? There's always predictions out there, and I always feel like, yeah, that's probably a little lower than what it's going to end up being because free agency is always some big-time money. But thanks for the text. Definitely appreciate you, and we'll see how it goes. Byron Murphy could easily be one of those guys that the Raiders pursue off top today. Up next, got a call from Obi-Wan Raider from Humble, Texas. Man, Texas representing today. We got Arlington to Humble. He's calling to comment on the trade for Geno Smith and, more importantly, how this move could affect the Raiders' draft moves. Here he is, Obi-Wan Raider from Humble, Texas.
Hey, what's going on, Q? Obi-Wan Raider calling in from Humble, Texas. Just wanted to comment on the pickup of Geno Smith. I'm excited about it, man. I think it's a good pickup for a third-round draft pick, the one we got from Devontae Adams. I think it's going to be good for us. it frees us up for not having to use that pick on a quarterback at our number 6 overall pick. We can use that on Ashton Genty or Terrell McMillan in the draft. We can still pick up a quarterback in the later rounds, but I think picking up Geno Smith was a good pickup. Reuniting him with Carroll's going to be good. And then I think Chip Kelly's going to be able to use him with his ability to run. And he's got a cannon for an arm. I'm excited about the pick. And it was a good pickup. I love to see us pick up Ashton Genty or Terrell McMillan with the number 6 overall pick. Someone on offense to help out Geno Smith. And then I like to see us go ahead in free agency, take care of our guys, bring back Spillane, bring back Trayvon Morig. It was good to see Max get his deal done. And then bring back some of our other free agents, like Epps in the secondary. Glad we brought back Palomar. All right, Q. Talk to you later, man. Raider Nation, one love. Peace. Obi-Wan Raider, and I'm out.
Obi-Wan, thanks so much. Appreciate you. And echoing what I said earlier, I agree. Good pickup. Better pickup than, the other options that were out there as far as I'm concerned. I wasn't very high on any of those. As you know, Sam Darnold, no thank you. Aaron Rodgers, no thanks. Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, right? So it's just, I think it's the best case scenario for the Silver and Black moving forward, and it gives them options now for the draft. And as far as, the Raiders free agents that'll be focused in on, I think Epps will be gone. Based off the Raiders re-signing Palomar, I think Merrick becomes a priority. Now, I'm not saying that Merrick's going to re-sign. I'm not saying that it's set in stone, but I think he becomes a priority at that safety position. So thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Let's go out to Ogden, Utah. Get a text in from JC Raider. He says, Q, JC Raider out of Ogden, Utah here. I have a question for you. Now that the Raiders have Geno for a quarterback as a bridge quarterback, what do you think about Jalen Milroe for the Raiders in second or third? I know you aren't high on him and you watch a lot of Alabama football, but hear me out. Chip Kelly has developed some good quarterbacks. If we roll with Geno for 2 years and develop Jalen, in your opinion, could he be the guy for the future? He's raw, but he has a great deep ball and could definitely make plays with his legs. Can the Raiders with Chip Kelly and Brady help him with the finesse part of his game and turn him into a great quarterback? That's JC Raider out of Ogden, Utah. And that's a good question. And I think that with Geno in the mix, you could take that chance now. I feel better taking that chance with him because if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You still feel like you have confidence in Geno Smith to be able to at least win right away, give you a chance to win right away at that quarterback position. I love Alabama football. I think Jalen Milroe, I spent a lot of time with him at the Combine in Indianapolis. Really good young man. I think he has really strong work ethic. I walked away from the podium session with Jalen Milroe feeling like I felt when I listened to Jalen Hurts talk. Like he knows he has work to do, but he's also got the work ethic to keep on grinding and getting there. The only thing that bothers me, as you mentioned, deep ball is fantastic. It's his intermediate, his touch passes that aren't very good. It's like he doesn't have a different speed. It's all fastballs. And so a lot of times he'll throw the ball too high. It'll turn into a turnover. Then he'll turn one turnover into 3 turnovers. And that just can't happen in the National Football League. So he's an athletic dude. He can definitely, light it up with his legs. I still go back to that LSU game. 4 touchdowns and 185 yards on the ground? Like, that's fantastic. So he has that. He has that in his bag that he could use, and maybe the Raiders and Chip Kelly could even use that as, a weapon on game days. Who knows? But I just don't know if he's going to be a long-term franchise quarterback. But I do believe in his work ethic. I do believe that he's going to do everything he can moving forward to be that guy. So if you can get him, oh, man, I don't know if even the second round, maybe third round, I'd feel a little bit more comfortable. But then again, if you're willing to take him in the third round, is the second round is it that much different? I guess we'd have to see how the board is dropping to see who's available at that time. That would be an easier way to decide if that's a good move or not. But definitely a day 2 guy. He's not a day 1 guy, that's for sure. So I could see the Raiders making that move, especially now with Geno Smith. But I still would be more confident if they were to get Cam Ward or Shador at the top of the draft and then know, hey, that's their franchise quarterback moving forward. And Cam Ward's not going to be there at 6. Shador probably won't either. But if one of those guys happens to fall, then go ahead and make that move. So thanks so much for that. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Tony Tone in Brooklyn. He's calling to talk about the Geno Smith trade and what about it concerns him. Here he is, Raider Tone in Brooklyn.
Hey, Q. Love what you do. This is Raider Tone calling from Brooklyn, New York. Just wanted to call and chime in on this Geno Smith trade. I've been in the boat with you, man. I've been pro Shador. I think we need to go young. All about having a veteran quarterback on the roster, but I'm not sure that this may be the right way to go. He's been good the last few years, don't get me wrong, but I'm seeing reports of him getting a extension within the $45 million range, and I know you talked about on your show previously if we were going to go the Matthew Stafford route or if we are going to go the Sam Darnold route, that it would be something shorter, and then we need to get our quarterback of the future. And I'm in that boat, brother. I'm not sure I love this move. I know Pete Carroll's an older coach, not being an ageist, and Geno Smith is 34 years old, and he is a mid-level quarterback at best. And if we're doing serious, not serious, and entertainment, to me this is just for entertainment purposes, and it doesn't seem that serious. It remains to be seen what we do with his contract, and if we still draft in the Shador in the future, or if that means we maybe pick a younger quarterback in the later rounds. But I don't know that I love it. I'm hoping for the best. Go Raider Nation. Just win, baby.
Brooklyn, stand up. Raider Tone, thanks so much. Appreciate you. You know, it's funny, me saying Tony Tone makes me think of Dwayne Wiggins. Found out on Friday that he passed away. Dwayne Wiggins was the founding father of Tony, a fantastic group out of Oakland, California. So don't mean to make this go dark, but just when I said Raider Tone, all I could think of was Tony. So rest in peace to one Dwayne Wiggins. But getting back to your call, I appreciate you. I think your concerns are valid, right? The contract extension is interesting. Right? I mean, what's the structure going to look like? How much is it going to be per year? Right? He's not the long-term solution. I don't believe that. He's better than what they had. I think that him and Aiden could be in a nice competition, and whoever they draft as well. I think that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, again, you have a good concern, a valid concern when it comes to the contract extension. But it now allows the Raiders not to be desperate in the draft, right? And like I said, when the Stafford thing was over, I was like, man, just trade up and go get your guy. Just bite the bullet, trade up, do whatever you got to do, go get your guy. Pick whoever you want at 1. Just go all the way up to 1 if you want to. Like that was my thinking about it. And then they make the move for Geno, and I realized, okay, now they don't quite have to do that. Now they could just sit there, let the board fall to them, and they have their option of what they do at number 6. So he's a capable starter, that's for sure. You know, if they go and get their guy, if they land Shador, who obviously has been my guy from day one, I've said it many times, then great. If they don't, well, that's okay too. They move on and they do what they do. But Raider Tone, thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. We'll close out with a text from Raider Jason in the 304. Q, Raider Jason from the 304. The Geno Smith trade was an excellent move. I love it when Mountaineers wear silver and black. Finally, stability at the position. Here's my short list of our guys we need to retain. 1, Merrick. 2, Spillane. 3, Kuntz. 4, Hobbs. 5, Chason. As always, love the show. Just win, baby, and go Raiders. That's Raider Jason in 304. Summed it up perfectly. It sounds like segment number 2, right? Sounds like segment number 2. All those guys I had on the list as well, right? And I'm not guaranteeing that the Raiders are going to be able to retain all those guys, but those are guys that they should definitely be focused in on with free agency and with the current $44+ million that they have in salary cap space. So Raider Jason, thanks so much for the text. Shout out to the Mountaineers out there in West Virginia, man. Geno and company. Remember how dynamic, who was it? Tavon Austin, who else? I mean, all those wide receivers that came out of there were just dynamic. Their running game was there was times I used to watch the West Virginia and Baylor just battle it out, and neither one of these teams had a lick of defense, but man, they could put up some offensive points, couldn't they? They put up some numbers, man, yards, touchdowns. I can't remember exactly what game it was, but man, it was like, I forget, but it was back and forth between West Virginia and Baylor. It was just some stupid number at the end of the day, which it's funny when I look back at it now. Baylor had a lot of those games, whether it was with Texas Tech, whether it was with West Virginia, all right, just Texas at times. I mean, just whoever it was, TCU, there was always just like scoring. It was basketball on grass. It truly was basketball on grass. And man, Geno Smith, he led the charge those years, I should say, with West Virginia. Now he's in the mix, and don't expect that guy, but he did throw for over 4,000 yards in 2024. So Raider Jason, thanks so much for the text. I appreciate you, and we'll see where today takes us, right? Remember, legal tampering begins at 9 a.m. Pacific time, noon Eastern time, and again, depending on what time you're listening to us, it might be going on full throttle as of right now, but no deal that you hear about today could become official until Wednesday when the new league year opens up. So we'll keep this party rolling. Electric Circus, we like to call it. We'll do that continuing on tomorrow. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.